Welcome to the Rob Call Bottom Up Show. It's available on Pacifica Radio and Progressive Radio Network and iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud and YouTube. And my guest for this show is Egberto Willies. He's the host of Politics Done Right, which airs on KPFT Radio and Pacifica Radio and other podcast venues. And he has a new book out. It's Worth It: How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. His website is politicsdoneright.com. Great to have you on the show.
Rob, it is my pleasure to be here. I've always been an admirer of what you do. I think you're one of the stalwarts for the progressive movement, so it's an honor to be on your show.
No, and it's a pleasure to have you. I really value and appreciate the work you do too. So you have written this book. What do you want to accomplish with it?
Well, let me say I had another book that I'm in the middle of. And after seeing the angst that the country is going through right now and the polarization, etc., I said, you know what? I'm a progressive person. I'm a very liberal, left-wing person. But the truth of the matter is I live in a very conservative area and I have a lot of friends out here. And all these friends are conservative. And how can it be that we can't really communicate with each other? And a while back, I was I'm still a board member of the Coffee Party USA, which tries to get people to talk with each other, talk together. And I said, you know what, maybe I should write a book that uses those concepts, which I have been using for some time, both on my KPFT 90.1 FM show in Houston, as well as I've been doing on my website and the podcast, etc. So I said, let me go ahead and write this book about how I have actually been talking to these people. And many times very successful. It's not about getting somebody to say yes, or saying, oh, I'm changed, but to go ahead and create a conversation that have people thinking, first respecting that they can talk to you and then thinking.
Because I have family who are conservative, family who are Trump supporters. And, I basically said to a number of them, we can't talk politics. And if they start to go, politics, stop. What's the weather? How's your garden?
The goal of my book, Rob, is to get away from that, believe it or not. I hope my book will help specifically, let's say progressives, right? When their right-wing family start talking and saying things, to be able to just sit back and listen. A lot of the stuff may be coming from out of Netherlands or some ethos you're not aware of.
Yeah, I listen and I hear, Trump is the best president in our lifetimes. And it's like, I'm zipping my lips,
Right, you got to. That is the hardest, when you know something, right? And I know you run across this a lot, Rob, because you are a very learned person in what makes a country move, etc. So you hear something and you just know that is out of left field. But there's something that's
or right field, more likely.
Okay, right field. Yeah, exactly, man. So you sit there and you're thinking like, I wonder how are they getting to that position, right? And the only way to know how they got to that position is to hear their story, right? And as difficult as that is, and I know for us, many times it's very difficult. At KPFT, they accuse me a lot of times of giving these people on the right too much airtime. And they on the show that I do every day, in the feed, they would tell me, Egberto, that guy is a troll. Why don't you leave him alone? And my thing is, I am not trying to convince that troll necessarily to say, oh, I've seen the light. But there are many other people that think like these people at different levels, and in just answering them and giving them some air, while I may not convince them directly, I may actually get that person that either is on the fringe or rather is on the wall, ready to tilt in either direction, or somebody who has already tilted, but maybe is not really secure in any footing, I may actually give them an out. And I think what we do, in my humble opinion, a lot of times is because we think we know, and many times we do know, that we don't give that person that little bit of space to fall into. And so what I try to say in my book, and I use a lot of examples with conversations that I've had with people on KPFT. Maybe I got this out of some of the stuff you've done on your book, examples and checking out other people, Rob. Maybe that's what it is. Okay. So the thing about trying to get other examples and use these real-time examples, because there are times that our KPFT program where somebody will come in blazing, guns ablaze. And when they're done having a civil conversation, they would leave and they'll be like, my best friend, you know? And the thing about it is, it doesn't happen all the time, right? And you don't want that to happen all the time, because if you can convince somebody of the tenets you believe in one session, somebody else can undo that, right? So you kind of want something that is, you kind of want to reach them where they're thinking. And if somebody gets, like, there's one particular person that follows me diligently. This is a right-wing guy. And every time I convince him of something, he goes to his other sites that he listens to, and he comes back with a counter position like, by the way, how would you handle this? And we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, till eventually, I remember one of these guys said, damn it, I'm a damn liberal.
Well, that's a massive success.
Well, I think so. I think, but you know, there's one of the guys who told me today, well, like, Berto, if you are so successful in being able to turn other people into liberals, which is not what I'm saying, how comes you haven't changed your sister? Because I have one right-wing sister, one left-wing sister.
And I'm like, right-wing brother.
So, hey, so we're not only brothers in headgear, but we're brothers otherwhere. But, you know, so I think it's not about absolutely convincing somebody immediately. Like I tell them all the time, I am trying to just get people to think. In other words, if I can get you to think, I think that indoctrination is a little less corrosive on you.
Well, that's all I want. Let's talk about your sister now.
And you know, let me give an example about that. That's interesting, because I made a comment once and I said, hey, I just want you to do one thing for me, because their church was going back into session. And I said, I don't want to talk ideology right now. I just want you to do me a favor. You know your brother loves you, and I know you love your brother. Just don't go. And if you can't see it for yourself right now, at least see it for me. Don't go right now. And, you know, that was how the communication started. And we, you know, the last time of the communication also came to the point where she said, I don't even listen to him anymore. I mean, she's not changing from being a right-winger. In other words, from being conservative, but she's not listening to him anymore.
Him being Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because, you know, I just had a conversation with my brother and we agreed on some things. And, you know, being a lefty rather than a liberal,
right,
means, you know, you can agree like, yeah, Hillary sucks.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And my experience is I can usually talk to conservatives and I can have a conversation and I can usually find common ground. And you know, like, now, I wasn't happy with Barack Obama once he became the president who prosecuted more whistleblowers than all previous presidents combined.
Right.
So I had some problems with him. And, you know, there's common ground there. And I think that helps. But still, you know, there's a part of me that goes, how can you still support this monster? You know, I'm working on an article right now, basically that the Trump plague is going to affect us for years longer than COVID-19 is. And
it sure is, yes.
Trump plague is basically the unleashing of narcissism and psychopaths. Giving them
you're talking about not completely health-wise, but otherwise. Oh.
I think that the Trump plague that is going to affect humanity the longest is the idea that it's okay to be a narcissist. It's okay to
Oh,
be psychopathic and exploit people and be as predatory as he is, to chronically lie. And I think that is the example that he has set as president of the United States that is going to be an affliction upon humanity for a long time.
you know, Rob, I had not considered that. I had not considered that. I got to tell you that. And now that is even more scary than what I call the pre-existing conditions that have been created by COVID, which, you know, that is a physical thing that's going to happen. A lot of people that get COVID get certain organs that are damaged permanently, and that's a pre-existing conditions, you know. But what you're saying is actually a bit more dangerous, because this is not only the people who's gotten COVID. This is saying we can start running things this way because it worked once.
Yeah, yeah. And it has, in this disease, this Trump plague has afflicted the Republican Party. They have turned into narcissists and psychopaths like they never were before.
Right.
And that's why there's the Lincoln Project, which is a group of Republicans who are trying to repudiate that Trump approach to politics.
Right. That is that. You know, Rob, that's a good. I'm gonna have to add that to my repertoire, and I kind of put some links. When you write that article, remember to index me so I can actually see that.
I'll copy it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's in the works right now. I've been listing the different characteristics of psychopaths and narcissists currently. That's where I'm at in the article. Because I've done a whole series of articles about psychopaths. I mean, this goes back, you know, probably 6-7 years for me that I started writing about them, because I felt that they are an affliction on humanity that should be reined in. And
Right.
I've literally written that psychopaths should be identified. And people have said, well, what are you going to do? Put a patch on them? And I go, well, maybe, because they are predators and they are heartless, cruel people who don't care about others, who attempt to basically manipulate and control them. And they do it with charisma.
They hurt people, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm kind of taking over this interview, and I wanted to get into yours. So let's go back to yours. You talk about the Coffee Party USA, and it had, you list its tenets in the book. And I think that's really fascinating, and I think that's part of the inspiration for this book, right?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the tenets of having a civil conversation, and tell us a bit about the Coffee Party. You're on the board of it?
Yes, I'm on the board of Coffee Party. One of the things that the first tenet is about being civil in your discussions, right? And being civil just means, it doesn't mean that you have to give up your ideology. It doesn't mean that you have to give up your position. What it means is that you have to be willing to listen to other persons, the positions of other people, and not only the positions of other people, but be able to engage in a really meaningful conversation. In other words, even if an idea that somebody puts out there seems so foreign to you, it got into that person somehow. And a lot of times, if you notice in the beginning of the book, one of the things I do is I identify myself. That had nothing to do with, let's say, some sort of a narcissistic belief. It meant that I wanted the words that I put out there colored through who I was or I am. Because what that means is when I say certain things, you can say, he's saying that because. So when I look at a right-wing person or whatever, and remember the Coffee Party is a transpartisan organization. What that means is that it doesn't have a party, right? So I can actually, it is really speaking to somebody from the point of view of on issues only. Not saying I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a this or whatever. So the civil conversation really begins by saying, I am willing to listen.
What about they come back and they're not civil?
Now, and that's the thing, right? It all depends on you, because not everybody at Daily Kos and on my site and these other places, people would say, why do you take so much? Why do you allow people to beat you up like that? Because they will come back, and in their comeback, it wouldn't be solely on issues. It would also be on you pinko liberal. You only think about that because you're a lefty and you want to us to pay for everything. We want you want a handout. Those are the things that they would come back to me with, right? And it's an easy way to turn off. It's an easy way for me to say, there you go, you're using who I am in the discussion, hoping to change the discussion because I'm going to concentrate on your insult instead of concentrating on the issues. And what I tend to do is overpower them with just a statement. In other words, if you call me you pinko liberal, you guys all think that way. My next thing to you is like, exactly how would you think, exactly what do you think I'm thinking? You know, so I mean, I would always bring it back to them. If they insult me, my next question would be, why is it that you're using that particular word to identify me? And I'll be very plain and calm in the way I say it. And a lot of times it really trips them up because the next response they're getting ready for is a fighting response. They're getting ready for me to really give it to them. And I'm not.
So this is something you would use to your right-wing uncle at the Thanksgiving table?
Yes, yes, yes. In other words, I am listening. I am actually listening, and it trips them up because what happens is at some point they stop getting mad at you because it's like, I am beating up on this guy and all he's being is nice to me. He's asking me these questions and trying to find out. And again, it is not easy because, Rob, you know what it's like to listen to misinformation that many times can be very dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when I go to the gym with my gym buddies who tend to be more conservative. That's
exactly.
True. So we need to take a brief show ID, and we'll pause here for 20 seconds so I can pop the bumpers in for the radio show and be right back. And my guest for the show is Egberto Willies. He's the host of Politics Done Right, which airs on KPFT Radio and other podcast venues and Pacifica Radio. He has a new book out, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and his website is politicsdoneright.com. So tell us more about the coffee party tenets, because I think that's a core part of what your book is about, is how do you do this? What are the basic ways that you think about dealing with people who you don't agree with?
Well, again, I always tell people that the first thing is accepting that, and this is hard, Rob. How did they get that way? How did they particularly? I want to see if I can find? There's something that I wrote that I can't remember right now. But the basic idea is, how did they come to that realization? If you notice what we have as a mission station, it says we empower connecting communities, right? A community can only be empowered if they're talking to each other, right? They can only, and that is why the rest of the world is, look at us as being, what's the word that I like to use? Look at us as being dysfunctional and no longer able to work because.
You left out one other thing. You said empower and connect. And to me, the connection part is really important. I mean, if we can maintain a connection and figure out how to create it and keep it alive, even if it's tenuous.
Yes.
That's such an important part of having a conversation and really a relationship.
And we were there. Think about this. If you let's look at the civil rights. Let's look at all these other things. I mean, it wasn't that Republicans and Democrats couldn't talk together. Republicans gave a whole lot of votes for civil rights. They gave a whole lot of votes for all these different policies that we pass, right? I mean, a lot of that, the Dixiecrats came out, if we take a look at issues, there was a time when parties could communicate. Yeah, different ideologies always had their issues, but parties were not separated the way they are today. There was not this dysfunction that we have today. This dysfunction is created because we have a failed economic system. He failed all these systems. So you have to have dysfunction for it to continue. So one of the things that I talk about, you notice when we talk about the coffee party tenet as being transparent and respectful, right? There's transparency in it, right? I think being transparent also mean letting people understand how our system really work. And in simply talking about how our system really work, what happens then is we're not talking ideology here. We're talking, I remember there's a story that I gave in the book where I am sitting down in a Starbucks, and this woman, you know, Sisters of the Revolution, white woman sits down and she sees, I live in a very conservative area.
You mean
so
Daughters of the Revolution.
Daughters of the Revolution. What did I say? Sisters of, yeah, Daughters of the Revolution, you know. I sit down there, this black guy that she thinks is a conservative guy given where I live, and we started talking about healthcare, and I didn't give anything about being liberal or anything else, just talking about, she brought it up and we started talking about how healthcare works, et cetera, and all of that. And she was agreeing with everything that I said, you know, and I started, so my God, this woman don't know that she's probably talking to the guy that's the most leftist person in Kingwood. So I had to fess up. I said, ma'am, I have something to tell you. I would just want you to know that I'm a left-wing Democrat. I actually mean one of those liberals. That's what I told her, you know. And then she turned red face and she looked at me and she said, but you're so nice. And I said, ma'am, that is how it is with everybody. I'm like, you're nice. I looked at her and said, you're nice. I'm nice. My friend, those ladies, the liberals who lunch, those ladies are nice. Maybe you should go have some lunch with them sometime.
So what I'm going to take as the takeaway from that is first you talked about the system and the problem with the system. And that got me thinking that one way to find common ground with conservatives is they don't think the system is any good either. So
right.
you can talk about the system, and that can really help you to find common ground. And then
yes.
You're talking about healthcare. And if you don't use the magic buzzwords, you know, Medicare for all or single payer, and you talk about the problems with healthcare, then it is possible to find common ground. Because I think really a lot of what you're talking about is finding common ground.
Yeah.
And
you know, Rob, you hit the nail on the head, Rob. You hit the nail on the head. If we find, and you notice we say connecting communities and transparency, right? So you hit the nail on the head.
And then you talk about in the book that there are certain fears that conservatives are driven by fear.
Yes.
And then you talk about how Fox News creates these caricatures of liberals.
Right.
That people think of when they think of liberals. And they have these, and you get into a collection of different topics like Medicare for all and black people and browning of America and anti-religion and baby killers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know going in that these are the things that people are thinking, oh, this liberal is going to kill babies and take away white men's rights. You know, I mean, I've been getting articles submitted to me lately, you know, that this is a war against white people.
Right.
You know, and it's from somebody we publish who I won't publish that stuff from him.
Right.
You know, he does some other stuff that I'll agree with, but you know, frankly, I'm a boomer. I'm 69. I'm white, and it's an embarrassment because most of the guys in my demographic are Trump supporters.
Right.
It's probably the biggest demographic of Trump supporters.
Well,
I have degrees. I have a master's degree. And Trump supporters tend to not have college education. But I mean, I go out and I look at guys my age and I go, ugh. And it's like, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
But you know what, Rob, you see, and you know, and that is where I think I'm more compassionate, right? Because, and people get on my case for it. You know, a lot of my black friends would get pissed off at me. Why are you trying to appease folk or whatever? And I'm like, look, if you grew up learning that you had a birthright, if you grew up learning that there was something special that made it that you were supposed to be in a certain position, that's how you grew up. And it's hard for you to not see the changes as a threat. So, and you know, so you have to first, and that's why I talk about listening to people first, right? The way I deal with white men on that particular issue who come to me and say white men are an endangered species, everybody have it out for white men. And then the first thing I would do is make a joke. I would say something like, I guess that's why the Fortune 500 companies are more than 90% run by white men, because, you know, we're really taking over. I'll make that joke first. And the only reason I make that joke is so that these guys see immediately, like, no, the power structure for the foreseeable future is a white man power structure. That's a fact, because that's how things are right now. And then I say, the next thing I say is, though, but you know what? I want you to think about this in detail. They're compared to the entire population, white men there's such a small percentage of these executives and these guys doing so well. These guys that are doing so well have given you the impression that you have a birthright to look forward to. And the reason that you are not attaining it is because of people who look like me. What have I done to really take away your birthright? When that birthright that you're looking for is the same birthright that I want, but also it's an ample supply, but they just decide that they want so much more of it that they make you believe you have to fight me for crumbs while they take it all. And then I'll break that down segment that into stories by showing them, look, the fight isn't with me. The fight is mostly, and a lot of times I always tell them, and the fight isn't even with only people, white men who look like you, because then and what generally opens the door as well is when I bring in somebody like Oprah or bring in some other billionaire and show that how it is the system, when you take a look at capitalism, etc., it's the system who oppresses other people. Because I'm like, think about Oprah. Oprah's worth, let's say, $3-4 billion. Do you really think that came from her, or did it come from a lot of other white people, black people, Chinese people, everybody else? And I would go through I would kind of show how all of this wealth disparity is what the real fight is, and that the people fighting to hold on to this structure is not only white men, but class. You know, I make it a class issue. And that's the reason why before this book, I wrote the book that was actually called As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. Never talked about race in that one, because the racial thing is really a capitalist thing, right? We are still in slavery right now. The only difference is we've known how to make it antiseptic, and I wrote about that in the book as well. We have antiseptic slavery; it's just not have a color anymore. You know, and when we start understanding these different features, we can start saying, oh my God, I have more in common with you than I have with the CEO there, or that I even have in common with Oprah. Because Oprah and that CEO has a lot. And the other example I always look at Donald Trump. Black people like to hate Donald Trump, right? But you don't see Kanye and all those guys hating on Donald Trump. You don't hear Beyonce, who has $1 billion or two, and all these guys really doing a whole lot of hating on Donald Trump. You don't see it.
Well, they're more in the billionaire class. You know,
right.
I don't have that much time left, and I want to cover a couple things. So
sure.
When you're talking to conservatives, are there specific topics that you kind of feel that you can have more success?
Yes.
What are some of those?
The economic issues I can have success with, even the healthcare issue I can have success with. The issue that I can never have or almost never have success with is the issue about abortion. And that is because I don't know enough myself. Things like, when does life begin? All those, I don't have answers for that. The one answer I have when it comes to abortion is like, I don't feel like I should be able to control a woman's body. That is not in my purview. So I leave that out of the game.
Let's talk about the ones where you do feel you have the most potential to find common ground. Economics, you said, and healthcare.
Economics.
And how about immigration?
immigration, there's a perfect story in the book about immigration. This guy was completely anti-immigration when I met him. And after I spoke to him about certain issues, I told him, we just talked. And I said, I don't want to tell you anything, just do the research. And we talked about things like Social Security and the Social Security need for immigrants to make up for our low population birth and other things, right? And so I got into a lot of those stories. The guy came into Starbucks one time, slapped me on the back and said, hey, I'm gonna make your day today. And he said, I really now believe in immigration and what I want is more immigration. And I said, really? And after I got over my shock, I said, you know, we are bloggers. So I said, would you do me a favor? Write me a blog on what you think. And I thought the guy would have just sent me flying and saying, no, hell no, I'm not going to do that and put my name onto that. And he said, okay, I'll write the blog. Of course, he made immigration from how a Republican would write it, but it was immigration. And it was something that if Republicans were in the majority, I would sign on to.
That's a good success.
I would say so. I mean, I think, you know, so I mean, he wrote the blog.
And how about healthcare? How do you?
Healthcare, it's so easy to make healthcare a theft issue. In other words, it is so easy to make insurance companies exactly who they are, thieves. And one of the classic questions I always ask that usually turn people for a spin is, if I have to pay $1,000 and I ask you, if you have bills of $1,000 and I said, hey, I'll pay those bills for you if you give me $1,300, would you let me pay your bills for you? Hell no. So why are you allowing the insurance companies? What are they doing for you again? Oh, well, you know, they manage risk, and because of risk, I say, okay, why do they have to manage risks? What I do, Rob, is I ask questions. I ask people to answer the questions, but they're leading questions, of course, but I ask them to answer questions. And the reason I do that is I don't want to tell them the answers. I want them to come up with the answer. And because they're intelligent people, they generally come up with the logical answer.
Now, you know, I interviewed the guy who wrote the book on the Trump cult, who suggested a lot of Trump supporters are like members of a cult. Where does that fit into your picture of how to have conversations?
They're correct. They're correct. There are some people that asking the questions, they will answer the question correctly and still say, I love Trump. They will answer the question correctly. And then they'll say, but this is not what I want. Okay, in other words, they will know that the insurance companies are ripping them off, and they will still say, but I like it that way. I just don't want one person controlling. So there are those people that are gonna be that way. But like I tell most people, that is not, I am not trying to change everybody into thinking as a monolith. I am trying to get everybody to vote their issues, and some won't. But if most do, we're in a good place.
That's true. And we got to wrap. Any last words?
No, I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you so kindly for giving me this interview. I also want to give you kudos on the work that you do at Op-Ed News, because like it's a site that I visit daily. It's a site that I love. And I think collaborating with among different groups and different sites and all of that in the progressive movement is a necessity. And I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear there as well.
It's a pleasure. And my guest for this show has been Egberto Willies. He's the host of Politics Done Right. The website's politicsdoneright.com, and he's the author of the book, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Rob.